Oh, well, Steph's taking a picture of us. Moving around. Live photo. These chairs are like, I feel like they're no profile.
I'm actually not mic'd tonight. None of us are, but can you hear me okay? Good, I'm glad. Thank you guys for coming. What a great group of people. We have live audience here. We also have people virtual, which is a lot of fun. But welcome, everybody. I think I know most of you, but just in case, I am Jennifer Gray. I'm the founder of Market Street Talent. We do IT staffing and consulting, and we're headquartered right here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We're happy to be co-hosts and co-sponsors of tonight's event, along with Loretta Brady, and she works at St. Anselm's College, and she also is the founder of Badass and Bold. She joins us virtually. Hi, Loretta. Big thanks to the committee of bright and talented women that helped us bring tonight together. We have Rachel and Jen from Market Street Talent, and we have Jill McFarland here from Bottom Line, and of course Loretta, who I mentioned earlier. So thank you, ladies. And it's really good to be back here at the 100 Club. We have the first 3, maybe 4 years, we held our event here at the 100 Club, and it's really good to be back in your newly renovated space working with all of you people. So thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. So this is our 8th annual Women in Technology event. I can't believe it. 8 years has flown by. More amazing, which is amazing, but more amazing is I see so many familiar faces. Julia, some people that have been here, many of our events, and some that have been here for all of our events. So thank you for coming back year after year after year. So this year, as I mentioned, we come to you both live and virtual, so a hybrid event of sorts, which is interesting, right? We never really thought we would have done that maybe 12 or 18 months ago, but today it feels like the most natural, normal thing to do, to come both hybrid. So I think that speaks, kind of thanks to COVID, which speaks to a little bit to our event theme tonight, finding our voice through COVID. So, but before I go there, I wanted to speak to our virtual people for a minute. So in person, you can tune out for a minute. But your Remo host, if you haven't met her yet, her name is Stephanie Baxter, and she's of New Hampshire Tech Alliance. And it's because of the Tech Alliance that we come to virtually on their platform, Remo. So thank you so much for that. You will see a chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. Use it freely throughout the event for comments and questions and to connect with fellow participants. And then speaking of Q&A, when it comes to the Q&A portion of the event, we will read your questions out loud and the speakers will answer them or address them. So ask away, your voices will be heard. You might see some announcements pop up from time to time, just letting you know what's coming next. And then after the event itself, or the live portion of the event, we'll put you back into your networking session. There is a table in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, I believe, called Technical Difficulties. If you are having technical difficulties, go there. Okay, moving on. Did I forget anything? So our theme tonight is finding our voice through COVID and beyond. The Women in Technology Committee thought of a bunch of different themes for tonight, or we brainstormed a bunch of different themes for tonight. We kept coming back to COVID, not because we really wanted to, but I think we're not done talking about it quite yet. So we, specifically the fallout or the effects of COVID that COVID has had on us, both for the worse and for the better. How has COVID changed us? Because it has. How has it helped us not only find our voice, but use it with confidence and conviction? Because it has. And how can we embrace this new reality and make our worlds better for ourselves and our families and our communities? Because it can. So here to guide us through a genuine, thoughtful conversation about all of this are two bright individuals of Bottom Line Technologies. We have Amy Jackson and Kim Schofield. So Kim works as a senior member of the talent acquisition team, And in addition to that, she has had the opportunity to start 2 businesses of her own, and she has 3 children that she's raising. Amy also works for Bottom Line. She leads talent acquisition and talent development, and she's worked in technology for 13 years. And outside of work, she also has 3 children that she's raising.
Not the same 3.
Equally challenging.
Right, yes.
Leading the discussion today is Jill McFarland, WIT committee member and general manager of Bottom Line Technology. So welcome.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jen, and welcome everyone again, and hello to all of you dialing in virtually. Jen, I think you said it perfectly. COVID certainly has impacted everyone in this room, everyone around the world. And when we step back and as the WIT committee really started to think about what was the topic and that we wanted to bring forward today, and we were thinking about speakers, these 2 women popped in my mind immediately, not because of their personal experiences with COVID or not because they've shared, how COVID has impacted them, but just because of the genuine nature of the 2 of you. And just in our interactions, you're so authentic, you're so genuine, you tell it like it is, you're not afraid to share personal stories and impacts, and you've just really helped me navigate COVID, navigate work-life balance, and been really great mentors to me. So these 2 were just came top of mind for me. So thank you very much for participating tonight. So as we jump into this fireside chat, let's start with that personal impact. If you guys could share a little bit about how COVID has impacted your world personally and share with the group. Let's start there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first, I'm so happy to be here in person. It's like crazy. This is the first in-person event that I've been to in 18 months, and it's great to be here. But I look back at I remember the day, and you all do, when you had your first virtual day at home. And you're like, oh, this is going to be 2 weeks. This is awesome. I'm no commute. I'm going to start working out, and I'm going to spend some time with my family, and then I'll go back to work. I mean, you just look at that and it's like, wow, fast forward 18 months and here we are. And so at first, it's been a roller coaster for sure. At first, it was a lot about like how it impacts me personally. Like, oh, good, I don't have to commute, and I'll have a little more time with my family, and I'm going to get myself in order because I have all this time now back. And then, you got into the grind of it, and you kind of then forgot about yourself, and you started to just feel the pressure of, working where you live and the blurring of all of those lines. And so for me, it's definitely been this roller coaster of days where I'm like, I've got it. I can definitely balance this. I'm doing it really well. And then there's days when, you struggle and you have to remember to put everything in perspective. So, but for me, the personal impact has really been to just try to keep it real. That's really all I can say is for me, it's about keeping it real and trying to remember what's most important. But I so much appreciate that I have so much more time at home.
Yeah.
We have dinner every night as a family, which is so special. And I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for COVID. So while it's challenging, it has so many upsides in so many ways. So that's kind of how it's impacted me personally. And there's been days when I've lost it, haven't we all? And then there's been days when I'm, and it's just easy and it feels great. And it's like the new normal.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, all of a sudden now I'm home, and I have worked remote for a few years. So I was always used to just everybody left, and I got to have like my nice quiet house, and I got to work, and all of a sudden all my kids are home and they're all having school, and it's a little bit more chaotic. I had to get a Wi-Fi booster because there was like too many of us on Wi-Fi. And so like personally, it's like what Amy said, just trying to like keep it real, like just not getting too upset about, why are you laying here? I have a meeting, like that kind of stuff, like move, that kind of stuff. So just kind of like working through that, and then trying to like just get some normalcy a little bit, trying to have some separation, and maybe changing from my like work leggings to like my nighttime leggings, something like that. So I felt like there was some kind of change in the day. but it was just, again, I think for me, it was more about like crowding my space because I was always used to working remote. And then all of a sudden everybody was around me and getting used to that. And it was great. Like to Amy's point, it was awesome to have this extra time with them. They were like my new coworkers. So, we could chat in between calls and they would say like, why would you say that to somebody? And I would explain why. And so I felt like I was teaching them something at the same time. So it was like good quality time. So I agree with Amy. It was like the one silver lining of like having us all be together for COVID is just that, the extra time and kind of all and I would get to learn what they were doing at school too. So it was good. It was a good all around, but definitely an adjustment for sure. And I didn't think we'd be here still at this point. So this is great to be here today in a live event, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that you guys both just shared a lot between the leggings, the school, I thought I was only going to be here for 2 weeks. I think because we're all still in it and still living it and experiencing it, it's really hard to take a step back and be reflective about all the areas of your life that COVID has impacted. It's not just the medical, the people that that have become impacted. We've caught COVID and managing through that. It's every single aspect of your life, socially, physically, mentally. And, I have to remind myself too sometimes to really take that step back, be reflective and think about, I'm actually a different person now. I'm a different person than what I was 18 months ago, 20 months ago. I think about different things and I think about different perspectives. And so, just that personal journey that we're all on, right, is obviously the topic that we're talking about, but really thinking that through and being more intentionally aware of how you're feeling, how you're thinking, how you're branding yourself, what you're putting out to the world, I think has really changed for so many of us over the last 18 months or so. And I actually am really excited for what's ahead too, because I think we have reinvented ourselves in so many different ways that we're still discovering what that impact is and who we're going to be when we come out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, priorities have changed. You think about all of those things that you've just talked about. It's like, some of us in the room have probably had a loved one that maybe has passed away. There are so many different impacts. And so it does impact your priorities. And being home with my family more is important to me. And that will now always be a priority to me. But you're right, until you can kind of sit back and it's a little bit in the rear view mirror, will you really be able to truly say kind of you're grounded in these brand new priorities.
Yeah. Which leads really nicely into like our next topic around thinking about the space that you both are in from a talent acquisition perspective and thinking about how do you attract talent to your organization, how do you retain talent in your organization. It would be great to hear from both of you about how the talent world has changed through COVID and what are some of those things that you're talking to candidates about that you never talked to candidates about before, and what type of questions candidates are coming forward with, and even the employees that you work with, what are top of mind and concerns for some of them?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I'm sure a lot of you have heard or read about, the great resignation, great reshuffling, and we definitely see that. There's a lot of candidate activity, and it's a real candidate-driven market right now. And so in thinking about this question, you kind of have to break it down in like 3 separate sections, one through a candidate lens, one through a hiring manager lens, and then one through like our lens, because we had to navigate and shift how we did our business as well. But candidates are definitely asking for more flexibility. Like it's truly one of like the question I would say 99.9% of the time is like, are we all remote? Can I work remote? And they get really like shocked when you're like, well, this will actually have to come into the office a couple times a week. Like, why? Everybody's remote. I'm like, I don't know, the manager wants me to, but like,
push it to the manager.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah. But it is definitely, so flexibility is absolutely, and I think it's, Amy and I were talking about this earlier. I think it's beyond just like being able to be home, but really also being able to have a true work-life balance. Even though you're working at home, like not impeding on that like home time. So it's 5:30, you shut down, like you're done, right? You're done with work. So really, do we embrace that type of culture within the company? And also, I think a lot of people are starting to look more towards their passions, and because the world now is more open to them. If you live in New Hampshire, you can now maybe work for a company in California or in Florida or in Texas. And so if you're really passionate about something that has, more geographically located and can't move, well, you can look into these companies. So people are really trying to find things that align more with like their own personal preferences. And then also culture comes up all the time, because people, although they want to be remote, they want to make sure they still have a culture. And so they want to make sure, like, well, how are you providing a great culture in your company, even though we're all remote. And so that kind of brings over to like the manager side. It really is up to the hiring managers to make sure that, they don't just say like, we have a great culture because I'm like a great person. It's more about what are you doing to engage your team? What are you doing to make sure that they feel part of the team? And so in that interview process, really like sharing that with candidates so that they know, we have team meetings, or, we try to have virtual happy hours, or, we do one-on-one meetings with each other so that we stay connected, just so that the candidates know that we do embrace that and we think it's important. I think managers are excited because just like the world is opened up for candidates, it's opened up the candidate pool for them. So if they have a real specific skill set that they were having a difficult time finding locally, now they can look anywhere and really be able to bring on that kind of talent, which is exciting for them. And then from like our perspective, talking to people through the interview process, a lot of people haven't really looked for it. I mean, there's people who've been in jobs for, 10 years, 15 years, even five years ago, they didn't go through a virtual interview process. So it's really up to us to make sure we're like helping to manage that process with our hiring managers, like letting them know, hey, sometimes the candidates don't have like the best, technology, so give them a break if their camera's a little fuzzy, on the interview. Or sometimes, the hiring managers, they want to make sure that, they can hear you clearly. So please make sure you're wearing a headset, or, make sure that you are, still dressed appropriately, like things like that during your interview.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, exactly. We have several, yeah. But people haven't really necessarily, never mind not talking virtually with other people, maybe not interviewed. So it's like a different level of nervousness. And so I think from our perspective, it's important that we help them through that and make sure they fully understand, what the expectations are. Yeah.
I think you nailed a lot of that. But I would and I would say, I think the cultural, the values and what's core to people's values is so really important. I mean, people are looking now for organizations that really align to what's most important to them, so they are asking lots of questions about, what do you do in the communities that you work in, and how do you support, X, Y, and Z. So it's very important to them that they're looking for more value in the organizations from a cultural perspective, and that I think is probably what's driving a lot of the desire to move. Just to your point, I mean, around, or maybe you want to work in an industry that is only on the West Coast, so
yeah. So it's good. I mean, like it definitely makes everything more open, but definitely more competitive. So for like it's our job too to work with the hiring managers and let them know, hey, you know what, it's a very competitive market right now. We want to make sure, we're really aligned with the market on salary and on title and on job responsibilities, because these are what the candidates are looking for. And it doesn't mean we have to give away, the farm. It's just more about making sure we have awareness to what we're competing against.
And I think there's going to be a lot of things that actually don't go back to the way they were, before COVID. So you think about the way that we interview now, and, I remember before, we'd line up somebody to meet, 7 people in the office, and it was like you had to move mountains to get 7 people to all interview one candidate in one day. And so just the availability of the technology and how we're all embracing that is great. So I think that we will always continue to use videos as a part of an early process. And I think that we demonstrate, I think, a lot more empathy too, because we actually start to get to know people in their home environments. And so I think that's an amazing thing that is coming out of this from a COVID perspective.
Yeah, like the dogs barking.
The other thing is for organizations, you're opening yourself up to like greater diversity in your candidate pools, because you've got, you're looking nationally versus locally. And so those are some of the, I think, really positive things that organizations will see on the other side of this.
I have a question. My sister did some interviewing with the Department of Education in Maryland. They did not want to see her at all. So all of the interviewing went on over the phone, so they could hear her voice, but they could never see her. And the reason for that was to avoid any kind of racial issues, that they were preferring one race over another. And that was about, I would say about 10 years ago. So it's quite a while ago. So is that something that, in terms of, you're saying you're looking for diversity, is that something that you have to be concerned about in terms of those initial interviews about having concerns about racial profiling in your CVs?
That's a good question. Should we
And by the way,
repeat it?
she got hired without anybody ever laying eyes on her.
Wow.
It was from
That's
the beginning,
interesting.
and it was part of the criteria.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Could you guys just repeat that for the online audience if you can?
Do you want to?
A question?
Yeah, before you answer, just because the mic's over there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So the question from the audience was, coach me if I get this wrong, she had a relative who interviewed with the Department of Education about 10 years ago. And through that interviewing process, they didn't want to see that candidate, didn't want to see her at all. And the reason for that was to ensure that there was no unconscious bias, I'll call it, in terms of, gender or not gender, race, and how somebody looked. So the question is that something that is still prevalent in today's world with the interviewing and thinking about that from a candidate experience perspective? Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I would say that, I personally haven't seen a lot of that in our interviews that we've done, and nor in the communities that I kind of network within. I haven't seen that companies are moving towards, blind interviews, if you will. I think it's a really interesting concept as we think about all of the unconscious biases that we can potentially bring into it. I don't think that, you think about what we were doing pre-COVID, we're just essentially now doing that online, so we haven't adapted some of those practices that actually will enable us to, better evaluate on an unconscious bias, to those biases. So I don't know if you have a different perspective.
No, I agree that, but I would actually flip that from a candidate perspective, because I know candidates a lot of times want to make sure that we are a diverse company, as Amy had alluded to before. So I think it's also important, the video aspect of it, especially because we are virtual, is great to make sure if you're a hiring manager, you have a diverse panel, you are making sure that you're aware of that being something that candidates are looking for. And I don't know, I think, like Amy said, I don't really see that happening now. I don't see it to be like an issue where we are today. Maybe it's something that, as we move forward and this becomes more of a normal, for us, we take a look at those practices a little bit more. But I definitely think it's, it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, and actually, you were just telling me the other day there was a candidate that we were interviewing. They were interviewing with another company, and they commented that they only met with white males, the entire panel, and then they were interviewing with us, and we had a more diverse interview slate, and that was really important to them. And so it is really important, as you guys are thinking about hiring in your own organizations, to really be deliberate about that and think about what those panels look like. Because even if everybody in that team is, of a particular race or gender, and think about who are the other people in the organization that can meet them, that they might collaborate with. So you don't always have to go just within your team. Expand your panels to be representative of your entire organization.
And I think a lot of what we're talking about here from the candidate perspective, your perspective, also translates really well into the topic that we're all here like to really dig into, is finding that voice. And I think what you're seeing is that candidates are coming forward, candidates and employers are coming forward, really bringing other issues and other topics to the table, because people are caring about different things, they're thinking about different things. And so can you talk a little bit about some of the examples that you guys have encountered of people really finding their voice through this COVID world that we're living in, and what some of those things that that we're seeing of people coming forward talking about different topics and different things that we weren't talking about before?
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think pre-COVID, if you had, like you had to run out and get your kids, or you had a doctor's appointment, like you felt really bad, right? Because you had to leave the office and it was a big deal. Oh my gosh, where are you going? I'm going to the doctor's. Are you okay? It was like a whole big thing, where now it's like you're home and you're just going to sneak out and go to the doctors and come home. And so I think people now, like, to kind of talking about your voice, is like they're okay with like, hey, Amy, I got to check out at 2. I got to go to the doctors. Where before you're kind of like, I'm going to sneak out. I don't want it to be a big deal. I don't want to cause attention to myself. So, but now you feel empowered to be like, I have a life, and I do things outside. I'm living with my family who needs me, and so I have a voice that I can go ahead and stand up for those. And I think that's really important because, I've been recruiting for many years, and I grew up in an environment where, like, literally, if you left your desk at like 5 o'clock, people would say, "Oh, you're taking a half day today," So it's it's really important to know that now we have that voice to be able to say, like, hey, you know what, my kids have a soccer game, and I need to leave my house at 3 o'clock so I can get there. You can call me if you need me, but I'm going to be there. And so I think it's one of the ways I think we feel a little bit more empowered, on an everyday basis. I think that is kind of what you were.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like the playing field has leveled for the work at home and work in the office, because now we've all been now at home for 18 months. And so now we all understand what the challenges are of that experience. And so to your point, I think you feel more comfortable to raise those. I had an interview with a candidate a couple of weeks ago, and her boyfriend like kept walking behind her. and it was actually for a role on our team. And she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm going to kill him. He keeps like," because it was clearly distracting her. And I was just like, I was just like, totally fine with it. I wasn't going to say anything about it. But she was like, he did it like 3 times. And it was kind of like one of those things in the back of my mind. I'm like, she's not telling me she's like, or, like all the things, right? But she's like, "I'm going to kill him." And I'm like, it's okay. Like, don't even worry about it. Like, you're working where you live, and it's fine. This is what your reality is going to be like if you join us. And it settled her down a little bit, and then we had a really good conversation. But you need to be empathetic. Like, again, going back to that empathy, it's like it's acknowledging it and saying, "Hey, you know what? You can't see him right now, but I've got one over there," or whatever. So just you make a little light of it, just to make them feel comfortable. And we ultimately ended up hiring her. Afterwards, she called someone and was like, "Oh my God, I think I bonded." And it's like, no, you didn't. It's okay. This is life. So just being acknowledging it. And I think that the more that you can lead by example in that, even in your own organizations, whether it be with your colleagues or, that's what's so important, is you need to lead by example, and then people will follow.
I think an interesting story, I'm not sure which one of you shared it with me as we were preparing for this, but I even think that a lot of leaders within organizations are shifting their mentality as well. And I think you guys were on a call not too long ago with the CEO of our company. And how many times have you guys been on a Zoom call, WebEx, or Team, and someone has a virtual background behind them, and they're like in the Bahamas, or they're, like they've got a green screen, or they've got all these virtual backgrounds, and sometimes it's a little bit distracting. And I think what you shared, if I'm recalling the story correctly, is our CEO said, "Stop with the virtual backgrounds. Turn your real background on. I want to see where you guys live. This is life. This is what you guys are managing through. You don't have to put up some fake screen behind you. 1, I know it's fake. 2, I want to see where you guys, what you guys are managing through. So if you got a kid on a lap, or you got a dog down here, if you got a messy background, it was like, this is just where we are. This is just who we are and what we do." So I even think like the mindset shift is happening even, across many, many levels across an organization, to recognize the empathy and recognize what people have been going through over the last year and a half. And we've all been on calls where the doorbell's ringing, the dog is going, kids, someone's trying to like nurse a kid, or, kids going off. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see people throw that anxiety, throw that nervousness, throw all of that out the window, right, to some extent. But I also think the other thing that's really interesting is, as managers and leaders, being so much more dialed in to your team, and so much more aware that some people it takes them a lot to be able to turn their camera on. It takes them a lot to get prepared to be in a meeting, whether it's a really important customer meeting, or whether it's you're just having a one-on-one conversation. People are managing through a ton of stuff right now. And so I think organizations are just so much more in tune to what people are thinking, are going through, and helping people actually pull their voice through.
Yeah.
So it's not so much like you have to do it on your own. There's so much more support left and right, top and bottom, to be able to make sure that you're pulling that voice through.
Yeah.
And that example is great too, because talking about like empowerment, if that's coming from the top, and your CEO is saying, hey, I just want to see your natural environment, and that's like trickling down, like that helps feed into the culture. Again, like we're all empowered to be who we are and live in our genuine place and be our genuine selves. And so it's a good example of just kind of, well, how the culture is where we are, but, ideally where everybody works.
Yeah. Another example of voice through COVID was we had a candidate that accepted the offer, a very senior level person, and his wife ended up coming down with COVID after he accepted the offer, and she was really sick and in the hospital. And he called us up and said, you know what, I can't take this job because it's a big job and it's too much, and I need to take care of my family. It was like it just hit him, and his whole life came into perspective. And I think that's another, finding your voice in COVID. I mean, that was the moment where he found his voice in COVID, and he realized what was most important to him, and he declined and decided to continue where he was at. And obviously, we were disappointed, but I mean, that's amazing, and that is the priority.
All right, last topic.
Okay, bring it on.
Bring it on. So, talk a little bit about the other side of the equation, which is burnout.
Yeah.
Right. We talked a lot about, finding that voice, being your authentic self, being who you are, but there's a burnout factor to it. I can't believe I think it was Lance before this that we were talking about, sitting at home at night at 8:30, your Teams goes off, someone's dinging you, and you're like, oh, should I look? I don't want to look, but I need to look, and just feeling like I can't step away because I work from my home. My office happens to be in my living room, where I am. And, I think Amy and I were talking earlier that when we first started working remotely, when we thought it was 2 weeks, the kitchen table was fine. No problem. Yeah. As the kids came in, fridge started going, I was like, well, this isn't sustainable, right? But and there's nowhere to escape. You work there, you live there, you do everything there. There's a burnout factor. So how do you manage through, the burnout that we're all also experiencing? There's a lot of positive things that are happening from COVID, but there's also that burnout factor of how do you escape it?
Yeah. I mean, it's easier said than done at the end of the day, right? I mean, I think it's about, you really have to set priorities, and you have to prioritize yourself and your own self-care around that. And you've got to set your parameters, but you have to then, depending on where you are and where you sit, you've got to manage up too. And you have to be, you need to manage up and say, hey, this is what I need to be successful. And you set those parameters and those expectations so that you have those agreements. Because if you don't, then there could be question about like, oh, you're going to the doctor, are you really working? It's important that you have those communications with your leadership around what's most important to you. And if you're a leader, it's really important that you make sure you understand what are the challenges people are going through, what are the things that are important to them, and that you have those open conversations so that hopefully your leader is coming to you with that and having those conversations. But if they're not, then you need to bring it up and say, hey, this is what's really, in order for me to do my best work and to show up every day engaged and excited and to put it all out there, there's some lines that I might need to draw in the sand. But you just have to take that risk and put it out there. What's the worst thing that can happen? Right. But you have to hold your own self accountable. Maybe have an accountability partner that can make sure that if you're challenged to, and I do it, I sometimes work late at night, but it's maybe because I went to my kid's soccer game at 3:00, so I try not to email the team, but it's like, I'll say, you don't need to email me back at 8:00. Can you, but that might be when I get it out. So it's about communication, and then it's about holding yourself accountable.
Yeah, I definitely think the communication is huge. Having like really strong communication with your teammates and with your manager, so that they understand, obviously you're in it, like your best intentions, right? You're here to work, and that's why we have the job. And I think we're all more forgiving of all the other nuances of life because of what's happened to us with COVID. And it is easy to get burnt out because all of a sudden you do feel like, oh my God, like you said, like you're sitting on your couch and you hear like an email go off or like Teams go off. And so it is easy to get there. But if you've already communicated like with the people around you at work that, hey, I'm out, it's 7:00, like I don't want to talk to anybody after, from work at this time, or like they know that you have a family, or they know that you have a commitment maybe with your parents or whatever it is. Then you just need to like, like Amy said, it's easier said than done, but you kind of just need to like let it go, you know, like just walk away and like let it go and not let it eat you up and feel like you have to like, I have to see that message or I have to, because it's going to be there in the morning, right? And I don't, maybe some people in here are, but I don't know that any of us are like emergency brain surgeons, so I think it's going to be okay. If you are, then that's awesome, but I don't know that anybody here, and so it's okay. Like, you know what, if that means that, you know, that email doesn't get responded to until tomorrow, if you were working in like the like old school world, your desk would have been at your office and you wouldn't be there, you know, and you kind of have to use that like mentality. Like if I were at an office, I just wouldn't be there right now, so they wouldn't have gotten a response. And I think it's okay. Like I think that's a part of the empowerment too. We need to say it's okay so that we don't burn out.
And part of the Great Resignation, I think there's two things that are happening. There's people that just want to change, but then there's people, and most people leave jobs because of their manager. I mean, that's pre-COVID and that's now. You leave because you don't feel supported potentially from your manager. And so, you know, it's really important that, you know, if you're in a leadership position, that you are thinking about how you nurture your teams and how you are engaging with them and how you're communicating and how you're, you know, really understanding what's most important.
That's great.
Great. We have Q&A.
I think we've got Q&A. How are we doing on time?
Good, 6:28.
Oh, look at us.
Bring up the
We have 2 more minutes we can babble. Yeah.
Here we go. Right on the side. Yep. Okay. So first question, which aspects of this new normal do you think are here to stay? Which do you think have actually been the most positive changes in the last year and a half?
Well, I think working from home in a hybrid environment is absolutely here to stay. I don't think we will ever go back to seeing the days of 5 days, the expectation that you're in the office 5 days a week. It depends. I mean, in the technology world that we work in, I think that that's what we can expect. That's one thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, the whole virtual like interview process, you know, I think again, because we are able to grab candidates from across like the country, you know, pre-COVID, we'd probably be flying them out and they'd be looking to relocate. And now we're just going to keep all of that virtual. I think that'll definitely stay. And I think it's a positive thing too.
Yeah, I think there's more that we need. I mean, I think one thing, because we're going to continue to work in a hybrid virtual type environment, I do think that we need to probably do more as organizations around how do we create engagement and connection. I don't think anybody's quite figured that out. And I think there was this kind of like, we're going to be back in 6 months. We're going to be back in 9 months. We're going to be back in a year. Okay, now it's 18 months. Like, okay, now we know that we're going to be here in a hybrid way. And so I think it's really going to be important to really start shifting and thinking about how do we keep engagement high, to the burnout factor, but how do we make sure that people feel connected? We've hired so many people, all of us in this room and within your organizations over the past, 18 months, and they've joined virtually. So how do you create community within your teams? And I think that's going to be really important.
Agreed. Yeah. It's funny. Kim and Amy and I, we've been working together now for 10 months.
Yeah.
Maybe. This is the first time we've actually met. In person, right? Right. And Jesse walked in, and I was like, "Yep, I've met her multiple times over online, but we've actually never met in person." So, yeah.
But I feel like I know you.
Oh yeah.
So well because of all the connections. Yeah, right.
And you know my dog.
Right. But that's just it. Like I actually had to pause and be like, "Oh, have I ever met Jill?" But that's like the environment you want to create where you have those, it feels like I've met you.
Totally.
Right. But and you do that with one-on-one with certain people, but we need to get better at it as a collective.
Yeah. Like even just having, I think, I don't think we do this yet, but I think it'd be great if we just did like, I'll meet you for coffee for 15 minutes. You know what I mean? And like get to know you if we're going to work on a project together or whatever, just even if like you build those kinds of things in, especially if you are like a complete like remote virtual, person and you want to get to know people. And it doesn't have to be a whole day event or even a half hour, really.
Yeah, you need to get creative because I don't know about you guys, but remember when we first went remote, it was like Zoom happy hour. And you were like, I cannot attend another Zoom happy hour. Like, no, first of all, you're encroaching on that time that we just said we need to preserve.
Right. Yeah.
So like, how do we do this in a different kind of way?
Yeah. So maybe it's like breakfast or coffee or
Right.
something. Yeah.
But I do notice like people that I've never worked with that I'm having a chat with online, a Teams meeting or WebEx, I'll take the 5 minutes to say, oh, hey, we've never actually met before. Tell me a little bit about yourself, rather than just walking into a room, sitting down in a conference room. I'm on my laptop. Yeah, what are we going to talk about now?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Which is
true.
kind of what we did before when everybody was in the office. You just walk into the conference room, you're all business, everyone's sitting down, that's it. Now, I think because of the virtual nature of it and because you haven't met, don't have that in person, I do think people are taking a couple of minutes to say, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. Or somebody might crack a joke like, oh yeah, you know, my dog's in the background. You see him, he looks like he's a teddy bear because all he does is sleep all day. You think it was just a fixture on my couch. So I do think that's one of the real positive things too that's happened because of the virtual nature of.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I just love what you said, that you know my dog, and my client relationships, I feel they've grown so intimate over the last 18 months because I do know their children and I do know their dogs, and it's like just such an amazing thing to be able to say, oh, your son has the sweetest voice, let me talk to him, you know, and then we'll just talk for like 2 or 3 minutes, and now you have a relationship with a client that is so much deeper than, you know, oh, we need to add a new field to this database. You know? So it's really been a very intimate thing, and I think it's actually strengthened relationships.
Completely. I did a webinar. We're in the business to business space, and I did a webinar a month and a half ago. And you open it up to Q&A, so people can, you know, just like this, write in your questions. We got one question. What's the name of your dog? So nobody cared about anything else that I was saying. I probably could have spent 20 minutes talking about my yellow lab and trying to get him to do a trick on the screen. Nobody cared. One question. 35 minutes. What's the name of your dog?
Yeah, the
So
human
that's note to
element.
myself, maybe my content stinks, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, but the human element, I think, is here to stay, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. What is the name of your dog?
Mac,
Oh.
like mac and cheese.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks like he's a yellow lab, so he kind of looks like a
Yeah, I've seen him.
cheesy.
Yeah.
Have you seen him? But he literally looks like a teddy bear. He just sleeps the whole time. He like never moves. So people are like, is that a real dog or is that just placed there? Okay, this is a really interesting question. This next one is, how do you think we can best advocate for ourselves at our workplace? Whether it's for increased self-care, working to avoid burnout, how do you navigate that professionally?
I mean, I think if I were to give advice on like what I would do in that situation is I would probably just figure out exactly what my goals are. Like what are my issues or my problems? Like what am I trying to solve? And then how can I solve that? And then who do I need to involve to help me solve that? So if it's the burnout or if it's, you know, getting more self-care and, you know, if all signs point towards my manager, Amy Jackson, then I will reach out to Amy. But in all seriousness, though, like figuring out what is it that you're trying to get, you know, like what is it that you need more of, and who is going to be able to help you in that organization to listen to you and get to that next point, and just be really super communicative about it, you know. And if it is your manager, explaining to them like, you know, I feel like I am online from, you know, 6 a.m. until like 9 p.m. every day. And you might uncover something and they might be like, why? You know, why are you online so much? You know, what are you doing? And then maybe you realize there's a different work stream you could be doing to make work a little bit more efficient. But I think it's about the communication and really like advocating for yourself. And but you do have to really figure out what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Like I think just going to someone and saying, I'm just burnt out, I'm tired, I work too much. Like I think you need to have like a real succinct goal in what it is that you're trying to accomplish so that you can work towards it together.
I love that. I have a sticky note on my door at the office that says solutions only, please.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about. You know, come with a solution. You know, it's important that we understand what the challenge is, but how do you think we're going to tackle that? Like, you know, we have to have some ideas about it, and it might mean we need to shift some things around to support you to do that. But solution, I think you're absolutely right. Come with what's my challenge and how am I thinking about solving it? And then hopefully your manager is receptive and is open to it. And if not, then you've got to decide if it's right for you. I mean, at the end of the day, you advocate for yourself, you bring it up, you come with solutions. And if things don't change, then you look internally and you decide what the right thing for you to do is.
And do you think that not necessarily the way in which you advocate for yourself, but do you think that some of the things that we've been talking about with respect to COVID and people thinking about mental health, people thinking about self advocacy, do you think that that will change as we move past COVID, or do you think that those will continue to stay top of mind, very relevant, what people want to think about, talk about, and keep it front and center within the workplace?
I'm hopeful it will stay front and center, and I think that it will because I feel like people have reprioritized as we've just talked about. And so I can't imagine a world where we go back. I mean, maybe it slips a little bit, but I think the pendulum will come back because it's so very important. The other thing when we talk about advocating for yourself is that if you're just not sure how to go to your manager, I'm sure you have somebody that you work really closely with too. Go to a colleague of yours and say, hey, I want to role play this out. How does this sound? Like if I'm saying, that's another way to do it before you bring it up to your manager. I found that to be super effective to, role play things out with people that you trust, and they'll give you feedback and say, hey, when you say it that way, it sounds, like you're complaining, and you don't, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I love that role playing. I also think that going back to your comment a little bit about authentic relationships and that COVID's really fostered that. Think about the trust factor when you're in the office and, well, some offices have more politics than other offices. And when you're physically in front of people, right, you can read a room a little bit differently and you know who's who and people walking down the hall. And there's a different level, I think, of politics that happen in the workplace versus now you're really establishing relationships that you can trust. And all that stuff kind of goes away a little bit in theory. Like you don't worry about it as much.
Mm-hmm.
You don't worry about like, is the big boss in? Is my boss in? Is, like you're a little bit more relaxed about it, I
Yep.
think, and you can create really healthy, trustful relationships in a totally different way than when we used to all be in the office. Because, I don't know what all of your offices look like, but some offices, low cubes, pretty modern, and also have offices, and you know who's in whose office. So if you see somebody walk out of somebody's office, you're like, oh, she just got called into the, big office. I wonder what's going on. You pick up those things in an office versus when you're remote, when all of us are remote. That has gone away.
Yeah,
Right?
I haven't really,
So-
that's so interesting.
That's a good
yeah,
point,
it's a
yeah.
really good point.
Yeah.
And you could probably, be more honest, like really speak your mind because you're not worried about, like
Right.
you said.
And like
Seen.
the rumor mill, or what we used to call the water cooler, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking about the TV show last night. You're all talking about what the heck is going on in the office. Like, oh, see that over there? Like that has reduced a little bit
Yeah,
because
you're right.
of the physicality that we're all not there to see some of those more public events.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges you've seen from leadership now? So I feel like similarly, I actually love the fact that there's a lot of humanizing across the board. And to your point, like the politicking and that sort of thing, I feel like in a way you're also getting a view into the leader's world. And there's some interesting dynamics there around essentially like how do you maintain that sense of leadership, empathy, like all of these pieces that before may have been symbolic or like, presence or how you handle yourself to a certain thing. Have you run into any sort of top-down sorts of similar concerns or similar new ways of navigating those relationships?
Should we try to repeat the question?
Go for it.
Let me see if let me make sure I understand the gist of what your question is. So the question is like from the top down, how have things potentially changed? I mean, I think what you're saying is in a pre-COVID environment, it was maybe a bit more intimidating in some ways, right? Because of the facade of what it meant to have the corner office or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden you're in an environment where you might be seeing this person in their home or things like that. And so is your question more around how you experiencing that as a person on the other side of experiencing that leader in a different way, or?
No, actually, it's actually the reverse.
Okay.
In a way that hadn't heard or have. I think it's really incredibly important for especially leaders in change to show the fact that they are engaging in change. And so I'm curious to see if you've heard from leaders in terms of like ways in which to handle this change because it is an evolution of that relationship. Like there are different ways that you have to handle your
Right, okay.
that or like,
So, okay. So your role as a leader, from a leadership standpoint, like how do you still lead now that you have all these other like human elements that are around you? Okay. So I think, well, first I think I think it's potentially liberating for a leader in some ways, right? I mean, that's how I would view it. And I think that leaders need to be more human, and I think we lived in an environment where our leaders weren't human enough. And so personally, I if leaders aren't taking this opportunity to humanize things, then I think they're only disadvantaging themselves and their teams, of course. So we talked a little bit about that before, just like the burnout factor and how important it is as a leader to, you need to lead by example. And so and hopefully you hear, you'd even be reflective for feedback, and you'd ask for feedback from your team, and you take that to heart, and you think about how do you adjust to make sure that you are able to, just kind of lost my train of thought, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I think too, like collaborate. I mean, like, when we speak to candidates, everybody always wants to know like how collaborative your culture is. Like, are you a collaborative culture? And I think, to Amy's point, like maybe in offices of old, maybe there didn't seem to be like that, the physicality of collaboration, because that manager had a corner office, and this manager had this office, and then the individual contributors were over here, and so you didn't necessarily get that vibe. But I think now putting the leaders in the same level, like they're also in their living room, so they're also in their kitchens. They also have kids and dogs and all of this stuff. It kind of brings that level so that you can have more of that collaboration. And I think Amy like makes a great point. Like it's probably liberating. Like the leaders are probably like, thank God, I can just be myself. I can just be me, and we can like talk about this like solution that we have to come together on, and it's a much more as opposed to being like, hey, can you come to my office? I need you to come to my office. And now you've uneven, have an uneven playing field. Now it's just like, hey, let's hop on Teams, let's chat about this, and now you've really created like a much more collaborative, thing. Thing's a bad word.
Does that answer your question a little bit?
Can I actually ask a follow-up
Yeah.
question? Are you hearing, it's sort of a two-parter, so are you hearing from leaders? Because I think it's, what I'm interested in is like, I think it's very obvious the need to advocate up and advocate for yourself, especially if it's change. But I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that leaders should humanize and should take advantage of this incredible opportunity. But it's not often that you get the channel to sort of hear if they are. And so question one, are you hearing from leaders? Is it sort of like, is there a push to trying to learn and expand themselves? And if not, what would you say to folks maybe trying to communicate up, trying to sort of advocate for themselves? And part of that equation is asking for humanization, like basically humanizing on the other side of the table.
Mm-hmm.
How would you sort of help someone navigate?
Yeah. Well, on the first part of your question, I would say that I think we need to also remember that leaders are in a really challenging spot right now, right? Because they're being asked to lead in a time that, I mean, this is unprecedented for all of us. And so all of a sudden your teams are virtual. How do I keep engagement high? I mean, they have so much on their mind. And so I think there's potentially a lot of blind spots there for leaders. So I do think that leaders are actually asking their organizations for support. They're like, how do I do this? How can you help me figure it out? And so I think as when we work in people success, I mean, that's kind of our role, is to help our managers and our leaders navigate through this. So I think it's important that we think about the tools that help them to be successful, and we talk about things like humanizing and how do you lead through change, and what does that look like. And so that's a little bit on that element. I think that we just have to also, if we're trying to advocate up, we also need to put, just like a leader should be putting everything in perspective there, we also need to put that into perspective. And it's like, where do we meet somewhere kind of in the middle on that?
I do think that not being in talent acquisition and being in a leadership role where I've got teams, global teams, right, more completely distributed. I think a couple of words that have been like very front and center over the past 18 months, I would say, is empathy. As a leader, I think leaders have much more empathy, but I also think it goes both ways, right? Because of the world that we're in. I absolutely agree with you, the word that you use, feedback. I think managers and leaders need to be asking the questions for feedback. And whether it's in a one-on-one scenario because you're talking about a tough topic, or even, one of the things that's so hard to get a pulse on is when you're presenting to 100 people around the globe. Did it hit the mark? Did they hear the message? Did it resonate with people? Was it inspiring? Did they get the call to action? Did they follow along on the message? You don't have any idea, right? Somebody could be completely not paying attention. Somebody could be multitasking. I was on a Zoom call the other day, and they had their camera on, and it was a picture of their bed. No person. It was a picture of their bedroom. I was like, okay, cool. All right, I'm just going to keep talking. So I think as managers, it's really hard to now assess, do I have that engagement? Is somebody following my conversation? Are you with me on what we're talking about here? So managers and leaders are forced. If they're not asking for that feedback, and if they're not asking, don't play me back my whole presentation, but give me some feedback. How did it sound? Did you get it? Can I go over anything with you? So I think feedback is critical, and not just in the presentation setting, but also like, what do you need from me as a leader? Am I doing a good job? How can I be better for you? What can I do for you? Leaders should be asking those questions all the time, week over week. And every week it changes. Every week, because of the world that we're living in, every week it changes. So every week managers should be saying, you need anything from me? How can I help you? Right. And that's how you're going to get feedback. And I think the other question that you asked was, if you felt like you couldn't give that feedback up, what do you do? I would encourage you to find another leader within the organization that you have a great deal of respect for, and do that role playing and saying, here's the situation that I'm encountering, and I'm not quite sure what to do with this. My leader isn't listening. My leader isn't resonating. Can I give me some strategies and some ideas on how to work with that person? And even like, I have a leader on my team, and she's really struggling with somebody else, another leader, and listen. And I said, hey, have you ever tried this? And she was like, I've never tried that. I'm going to try that. And I'm like, go try that. See if it's going to be helpful. And so I think there's just a lot of role playing. I think that there's a lot of psychological safety that's happening too within organizations, that people are feeling safer to come forward and talk about some of these topics in a more organic, trustful way. But I totally agree with you. I think leaders should be fully embracing what's happening now and being real, authentic, being open. How can I grow as a leader for you?
I love your comment on just sharing with others what you're going through, because when you start to talk about what you're going through with somebody else, whether you're asking for feedback on how you go, but they might hear something in your story that's different. Like even when we were preparing a little bit for this, just like you hear themes and you hear things, and you can just by having those conversations with people, you can help your colleagues, and you can point out, well, what I think you're saying this, but I'm actually hearing this, and so maybe you should think about it in this way. It sounds like that's a little bit about how you gave the advice to the other leader, but so talking these things through is really important.
Yeah. I just want to say that this whole line of questioning and talking has got me inspired to call my manager and ask him, is there anyone who thinks needs mentoring? The first Women in Tech that I ever attended was on mentoring, and it was a really terrific presentation. And as I watched it, I sort of realized, like, oh, this person was a mentor to me, and I was a mentor to this person, and it was nothing official. It was nothing really thought through to make me a mentor or make somebody be a mentor. And I just really recognize from what you're talking about how this new world creates a hole in how you find mentors. And I love everything you said about finding someone you feel comfortable with role playing, or finding another manager that you can talk to. But I think maybe we need to be really proactive about how we're going to create the mentoring that's sort of happened very fuzzy, because it's not that easy when you work remote to find those mentors.
Right.
So, and they're so important to your growth.
So the comment, just for those that might not have been able to hear it online, was just that she's been inspired by the thought of really more formalizing mentorship and looking for mentors in the organization to be able to have these conversations that we just talked about through role playing and getting advice and things.
I have a question. Due to COVID, we keep referring to the topic of the Great Resignation. Thinking of both sides of the spectrum, leaders and candidates, do you feel the challenges have been more working with leaders to help them adapt to the new normal and be competitive when they're trying to attract talent, or on the opposite side with the candidates and helping them realize that although it is a candidate-driven market, they are competing against way more than they ever were. Maybe they should think about that 30K increase they're trying to
Being unrealistic, yeah.
making sure that they can actually live up to that.
Yeah. So the question is, with the Great Resignation, are we finding it more challenging in working with leaders to help them adapt to what this new normal is, or is it more challenging with candidates who certainly sometimes have unrealistic expectations, like a $30,000 raise?
I think honestly, I would have to say it's a 50-50 split in my experience. And it really just depends on, the role that you're recruiting for. There are some roles that have more of a, technical skill set or a specialized skill set that, candidates are being like, well, my skill set's in demand and I can demand, it's like, well, that's great, but you need to be realistic, and there is a market value to like what what you can offer into a company. And so those candidates are a little bit more, difficult to kind of work with. But I think, even just educating them, like and just saying, I agree with you, you have an awesome skill set, but you also have to, understand that we have budgets, we're a company, we're not just like, somebody throwing money off a tree. So I definitely think those people come into play, but I would have to say the manager expectation, it tends to be a little bit more challenging because like they're part of your family, right? So you work with these companies with these managers and you want to make sure that you are being empathetic towards like, they probably just had a couple people resign and they're like, we're down on people. And so you feel badly for them, but you also want to make sure that you're setting them up for success during the interview process and you're setting them up for success during, hiring like the right people. And sometimes you'll have those managers who they forget that it is a candidate driven market. And like, it's like, nope, next. And you're like, wait a minute, like before we go next, let's stop and let's calibrate and let's make sure we're talking about why we're saying next. And maybe we'll uncover almost like to the same premise of that peer talk, like maybe you're saying something that I'm not hearing and vice versa. So it's just, I think that it's happening definitely in a 50-50 split. And it's just requiring a lot more communication than maybe we had to do in the past, and a lot more like education, I guess, for lack of better terms, on what we're seeing, because we're really the people that are seeing both sides. And we can bring that information to both sides and give them both the perspectives.
Yeah, and on the education piece, I do think for hiring managers, for us, the biggest thing in the beginning of the Great Resignation and when the market just shifted overnight, it was about educating that our hiring managers that great talent is not going to be on the market for very long, and you need to make really fast decisions. But you need to you need to make good decisions, but they need to be fast. And so we don't want to shorten the process. We still need to be as thorough as we always have been, but we need to make sure that this is your top priority so that we can properly evaluate and we can make fast decisions. And we've won in many instances because of the speed in which we've been able to do that. And then we use those examples. We say, it's about education, but then it's also telling them the stories of like, here's where we won and why. And then you start to get people on board that are still like, oh, I'll meet them next Tuesday. It's like, no, they won't be here next Tuesday.
Did you just hear me?
Yeah, I think this is going to sound funny talking to folks from Market Street Talent a little bit, but as much as there's empathy for managers, there's got to be a lot of empathy for what's happening in talent because of the Great Resignation, right? I don't even see Lance, Jen, right? Like, market, you guys are crazy with candidates and customers coming to you for the needs. So, what you guys are also going through from a talent acquisition perspective is really challenging. So I think needs a lot of empathy here on this side of the aisle too. And I definitely think that when we turn around as leaders and say, well, we're not moving fast enough. Well, she goes, well, that's because you didn't respond to my email. Like, we lost the candidate because I know you're busy, but get on it. I can't hold this, so it's you got to work really closely together with it. So I mean, it's the candidates, hiring managers. And the other thing that I've seen out there a lot, particularly on social media, is candidates giving the recruiters a hard time because they didn't give you enough feedback, right? How many posts do you see on LinkedIn or social media about like, oh, I just didn't get the job and I didn't get a dissertation on why I didn't get the job. And, you know, people are really upset about that. And I hear that and I have empathy for that, but also based upon, you know, for you guys to be able to spend 30 minutes with every candidate or 15 minutes even with every candidate to explain why they didn't get the job. I mean, that's all you guys would do. Right. You wouldn't, you know, spend a lot of time recruiting. So there's just a lot of dynamics to manage right now, for sure. Yeah.
Any other questions?
There's one other question online, is, do you think gaps in employment or shorter stints at companies will be looked at in a more positive light because of all that's happened in the last 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, so when I first started recruiting, if you weren't somewhere for at least 7 years, you were a job hopper. Oh my God, he was only here for 5 years. What a job hopper, you know? And now if you are somewhere less than, you know, if you're like somewhere longer than 5 years, we're like, what is wrong with them? Why haven't they left, you know? So it's like, it's totally like, you know, shifted. But I do think, you know, from a recruiting lens, I am a little bit more forgiving of people who have had shorter stints, mostly during the COVID time. Like if they had shorter stints pre-COVID, you know, like their 3 jobs before COVID, they only lasted 8 months, then I might be like, okay, there might have been a problem before COVID. But like during this time frame, like a lot of people, I've interviewed a bunch of people who hiring managers have actually hired who have said, you know what, once I got laid off from COVID, I decided to travel. Like I've never been able to travel before, and I wanted to. Well, maybe that wasn't an example.
Yeah, you're like, what's wrong with you? I don't think you want that kid. He's a liar.
And like, yeah, exactly. Well, like travel to go visit my family, or like spend time with my family, or I got a puppy and I wanted to just really be with that puppy. You know, whatever it was. Like, again, it's kind of being a part of that like empathetic world. And so, like, I'm okay with that, you know, because they had a valid reason, and now they're on the job search. And then usually my follow-up question is, well, tell me about your job search then. And if their job search is really poor and they're like, well, I just applied here because it looked good, then I'm like, okay, maybe they're not serious. But if like, I've been really at it. I'm active with 5 companies right now. You know, these are the types of roles that I'm looking for. And like, then they're serious. So I definitely think I look at it, you know, as a recruiter in a more positive way during the COVID times, like for sure. But I, you know, that's like grandfathered in, you know, from like, if it was before, I still might think like, oh, maybe there was an issue. But I think it's okay. Like, you know, I have one guy that became a finalist, and he literally, him and his wife decided to move to Florida because they've always wanted to. And so they took that time. I don't know why it took him 10 months to move to Florida, but it did. And he like settled, and they got like involved in the community, and he felt established, and then he felt ready to look for a job. And he had really good skills, and like he was a finalist for one of our positions. So, you know, I think it's something to be mindful of and to value, you know, if they have good skills, for sure. Mm-hmm. I think it will run out though. Like, I think there is going to be, now that people are hiring so much, like I do think, you know, for candidates out there, they should be aware that, you know, pretty soon, like the gig's up. Like, you know, you can't keep saying, well, it was because of COVID, you know, like people are hiring. Yeah. So you do have to be a little bit careful of that.
Yeah. All right, those are all the questions online. Any other questions for the room? All right. All right, you want to do raffle?
Yeah, sure.
We've got some
good stuff to raffle off.
Yes. Both for in person as well as virtual. So yes. Virtual attendees, you're not off the hook quite yet. We've got some raffles for you.
Okay, we'll start with the virtual ones. If you'd like to pick the first one, we have a gift card to an online shop called Polished Prints.
And the winner is Danielle Winters.
Woo! Woo! So you'll get an email from Jen at Market Street Talent with your gift card. So we got that one. And then for our other online winner, we have a gift card to Etsy.
Best Scare.
Woo! Beth!
Thank you. You're welcome. Congratulations.
Katie, can you say that, please? You? All right, in person.
You want to come?
Oh. All right, first we have Lizology.
Jesse Feeney.
That's zoology.
And then we have Jane G.
Randy Johnson.
Excellent. All right, well, I think we're right on time, so thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully this was an engaging fireside chat for everyone here in the room and virtually. Great, successful hybrid event, I would say, for sure. And just a couple of quick announcements. Please stay, network, enjoy some refreshments, and get to know folks in the room. We'll be here for a while, so don't feel like you need to rush out the door. And also, we're going to be doing a WIT event in the spring. So stay tuned for details about the WIT event that we'll do in April. Yeah, kind of thing. And I'll plug it because we're always looking for speakers.
Yep.
So definitely let us know if you'd like to be part of a panel or a keynote speaker. So we'd love to, hear other voices obviously come through as part of this series. So thank you all, and thank you to Kim and Amy. Wonderful insight. Thank you. Thank you, Jen, Rachel, everyone. Yes, thank you, Jen. All right. I think that's it.